In the previous classes, we were discussing about various fee-based or non-fund-based financial services. So the next service is depositories. So who is a depository? Let's see who is a depository. Suppose you are a person who is interested in dealing with shares or securities. You wish to purchase and sell securities and earn something out of it. And you will need to approach the companies that are issuing these shares or securities. Now, what the depository does is they will act as an intermediary between these companies and the person who is interested in investing in the securities of these companies. So, depositories will provide a central location for keeping the securities on deposit. In earlier days, physical certificates, that is, paper certificates in the paper form was kept as share certificates as proof of your investment in the securities of a particular company. You were given paper certificates. That is what we call physical certificates. But nowadays, technology has advanced and we do not want to waste our time. We need to carry out transactions at a very fast pace. So what we do is we'll hold these securities certificates in an electronic form. So depository is the place where these share certificates or securities which are held in the electronic form are kept. That is what I have explained in the beginning part as meaning. See, depository is a central location for keeping the securities on deposit. It is the place where the securities are stored, recorded in the books on behalf of the investor. So we can say that a depository is a nominee who keeps the scrips on behalf of the investor. What are scrips? Scrips are nothing but the shares and securities which the investor invests in. So the depository is simply a place or a central location where all the securities are held for safe custody. Now, what is the definition? We can define a depository as an institution that transfers the ownership of securities in electronic mode on behalf of its members. So I said it's a central location where all the securities are held. Now, if you want to transfer the ownership of your securities to someone else, you can do so through the depository. And if you wish to transfer the securities of someone else into your name, then also you can do it through depositories. So the definition is it is an institution that transfers the ownership of securities in electronic mode on behalf of its members. What are the objectives of a depository? Why do we need a depository? What are its objectives? It reduces the time for transfer of securities. Okay, quick transfer of securities is possible because all the securities are handled by a central depository. This depository is a link between the company that issues the securities and the investor who has invested in that particular company's securities. So easy or quick transfer is possible because the depository holds all the contacts together. The next is it avoids the risk of settlement of securities. The depository will definitely check the genuinity of the investor as well as the company who is issuing the securities. So there is no risk of fraudulent activities, no fear of being cheated. So it avoids the risk of settlement of securities. The third objective is it enhances liquidity and efficiency. Say, quick transfer is facilitated through depository. At the same time, if you want to transfer the ownership, it is possible at a very quick pace. So it offers liquidity. Liquidity means the quickness with which you can convert your securities into cash, right? So it offers liquidity and efficiency. You can transfer your buyers and sellers are brought together, and if you wish to sell, then you can find a buyer immediately. If you wish to buy, you can find a seller immediately. So it enhances liquidity and efficiency. Fourth one is it reduce cost of transaction for the investor. Cost of transaction means all the costs involved in carrying out a particular purchase or buy transaction. If there is no depository, then the investor will have to depend upon a broker. He has to pay a lot of fees to the broker as brokerage. So there is a lot of expenses connected with purchase and sale of a security. But because there's a depository, this cost of transaction is reduced to a considerable extent. Next is create a system for the central handling of all securities. So all the securities are handled by a central institution known as the depository. It improves or promotes the company's competitiveness by complying with global standards. Okay, so a systemized procedure is followed for storing the securities, for transfer of securities, for purchase and sale of securities. So there is a systematic manner in which this procedure is carried out. It meets with the global standards. So it could also attract foreign investments. Foreigners will also be convinced to invest in the securities of a domestic company. So it ensures flow of foreign investment. So it promotes the country's competitiveness. Last one is provide service infrastructure in a capital market. So their main objective is to provide service to their clients, and it develops a service infrastructure in the capital market. These are the main objectives of a depository. What are the activities? They accept deposit of securities for custody. Okay, they are holding the securities on behalf of the investor, so they offer custodian services. Then they make a book entry for the securities which are immobilized in its custody. Immobilized means we are blocking the physical transfer of that securities, right? We are asking the depository to keep that securities in the electronic form for a certain period of time. So computerized book entry is made in the name of that client in the books of the depository. Now, they maintain a proper book of all the securities which have been pledged with them, or all the securities which have been asked to be held in their custody. They also facilitate withdrawal of the securities. If the client wishes to withdraw the securities, they can do so through a systematic procedure. If they wish to rematerialize or dematerialize their securities, it is possible. So we need to be familiar with two terms. What is dematerialization and what is rematerialization? Dematerialization means you're converting your paper certificate or your physical certificates into electronic certificates. That is known as a dematerialization. What is rematerialization? Suppose a client wants to convert the electronic certificates into paper certificates. That is known as rematerialization. So withdrawal of securities is allowed by the depository. Now, distribution of dividend and interest can also be done through depositories. The company can hand over the duty of distribution of dividend and interest to the depository. They can do so through the depository. Redemption of securities on maturity. Once the securities have been held till the maturity date or till the due date, then the securities are settled. That is, the investor is given back his money and the share certificates are returned back to the company. So redemption of securities on maturity is one of the activities carried out by the depository. Now, what is a depository process? We need to be familiar with four constituents, okay? The first one is the depository. The depository is the person who holds the securities of the client or the investor. Now, if the investor wishes to keep their securities with the depository, they cannot directly approach the depository. They need an intermediary, and that intermediary is the depository participant. So the depository will interact with the holder of securities through the depository participant. Just like we have brokers in the stock exchange as a depository participant in the depository, and we'll do all the dealings through depository participant. Depository participant is denoted as DP. Okay. So the link between the depository and the owner of the securities is the depository participant. he is considered as an agent of the depository, and so if there is any act of omission or commission by the depository participant, the depository will be held liable. That is, if the depository participants makes any sort of an error or any mistake, then the depository will be answerable to the client, because the depository participant is deemed to be the agent. Deemed to be means considered as the agent of the depository. Both the depository and the depository participant needs to be registered with the SEBI. Only those who have registered with the Securities Exchange Board of India can act as a depository and depository participant. The third constituent is the beneficial owner. He is the real owner of the securities. He is the one who has the rights and liabilities associated with the securities. Fourth constituent is issuer, that is a company who issues the certificate. The security. So there are four constituents. There's a depository, there's a depository participant who acts as a link between the depository and the shareholder. Third is the beneficial owner, who is the real owner of the securities or the shareholder. Fourth is the issuer. Now we are looking into the procedure, right? So those who wish to avail the services of a depository need to open an account with the depository. Now, how will they open an account with the depository? They will have to approach a depository participant and open an account through him. So that is the first stage. Then the investor has to enter into an agreement with the depository participant. We need to find a depository participant. We need to enter into an agreement with him. Like what is his percentage of commission for each transaction he does on behalf of the client. So we have to enter into an agreement with the depository participant, and once we have entered into an agreement, then he will issue you a client number, and that client number is used to identify you. Now, if a client or the security holder wishes to dematerialize his securities, that is, he wishes to convert his paper certificates into electronic certificates, then he can give an application to the depository participant. That application is known as a dematerialized request form. Application needs to be submitted in the dematerialization request form. That's known as a DRF. Now, once the depository participant gets the DRF, that is forwarded along with the share certificates to the issuer or to the registrar and share transfer agent. The registrar and share transfer agent is known as the RTA. And they will transfer the paper certificates to the RTA along with the DRF, and they will electronically register the request with the depository. So they will ask the depository to hold the securities of the client in electronic mode. At the same time, they will forward the dematerialization request form and the paper share certificates to the RTA, that's the registrar and share transfer agent. Now, once the depository has got the intimation from the DP, that is the depository participant, they will electronically record they will electronically intimate the dematerialization request to the respective issuer company and the RTA. So the issuer company need to be notified that the securities or the shares which they issued are now being held in electronic format by the depository. So an intimation will be sent to the issuer company by the depository. Now the issuer, that is a company or the RTA, verifies the validity of the share certificates. I said first a DRF, dematerialization request form, is handed over to the depository participant by the shareholder. The depository participant will forward it to the company and the RTA, and they will inform the depository. The depository will inform the issuer company and the RTA that they have been requested to electronically record the shares of the client. Now the company or the RTA they have got the paper certificates. They'll verify the validity, and they will also verify the validity of the signature of the investor in the DRF, and then they will say, okay, this is all proper. You may hold it in electronic form. They will intimate the depository and the depository participant. On receipt of the intimation that this is a valid request, the depository will make the entry in the account of the client through the depository participant, and thereby the dematerialization process is complete. Now, if Rematerialization is required, then again a process like this is followed. They will submit a request to the depository participant. Depository participant will inform the company, the depository, and the RTA. They will confirm whether it is a correct request and whether it's a genuine one, and then they will give the intimation to the depository, and the depository will rematerialize it through the depository participant. Now, two main depositories is the national NSDL and the CDSL. The National Securities Depository Limited. You might be asked to give the full form of NSDL or CDSL. So study the full form. The National Securities Depository Limited. It was established in 1996 and it was promoted by the IDBI, UTI and NSE. CDSL stands for Central Depository Services Limited. It was established in 1999. It was set up by the Bombay Stock Exchange. The other one is under the National Stock Exchange. This one is under the Bombay Stock Exchange. So NSDL and CDSL are two main depositories. There are many other depositories in the country at present. Moving on to the next non-fund-based financial service, that is the Project Advisory Services. See, Project Advisory Services includes all those advices given to the client to ensure that he plans a project effectively and efficiently. Advices are given so that projects can be managed efficiently and effectively. Now, cost estimation is done as part of project advisory services so that the client can be given guidance on how to control the cost. Now, the project will also be assessed on whether it is technically viable, commercially viable, or financially viable, and the performance is always evaluated to ensure that the project is being implemented successfully. As part of project advisory services, project reports are prepared. Why do we need project reports? We need project reports to obtain government approval. If we are to get a license or subsidy or any sort of a consideration or approval from the government, we need to submit a project report. And if we want loans and financial assistance from financial institutions, then project report needs to be handed over to the financial institutions to convince them about the prospects and genuinity of the project. So the project report is to be prepared and all sort of assistance regarding that is provided. Now we need funds to start a project and the sources of these funds and the pros and cons of each source is pointed out by project advisory services. So basically everything with regard to planning a project and implementing it is carried out under project advisory services. Next services, mergers and acquisitions. What is merger? When two companies join together and create a new company, that is known as merger. That is why a merger is referred to as marriage between two companies. Once merger is carried out, there are no longer two companies, there will only be a new company which is jointly owned by both these companies. Now, what is takeover or acquisition? Takeover or acquisition means one company is acquiring the controlling interest in the share capital of another company. That is, one company is purchasing another company. That is known as a takeover or an acquisition. Now, the financial services with regard to this is, in case of a merger and acquisition, different companies are coming together and forming a new company, or they are creating a new sort of a business deal, right? So the shareholders of both the companies need to be, the interest of the shareholders need to be safeguarded. So whenever there is a merger or takeover proposal, then its financial and technical viability is studied and proper guidance and advices are provided. And government and financial institutions need to give their approval for merger and acquisition. So all those activities needed to convince these parties are carried out by the financial institutions or financials as part of financial services. This is merger and acquisition. Next service is capital restructuring service. I have already explained about these services as part of merchant banking. That is why I'm just briefly explaining right now. So capital restructuring involves changing the mixture of debt and equity in a company's capital structure. Okay, what is capital structure? Capital structure is the percentage of debt to be included in your capital and percentage of equity to be owned in your capital. See, when you're starting a company, you need a lot of funds. That initial fund that you need to start a company is known as the capital. Now, you can raise that capital either from your own funds, that is known as equity, or from borrowed funds, which is known as debt. Now, how much of your capital should be borrowed and how much of own funds should be used in your capital, that you need to decide. That ratio in which you invest using borrowed funds and owned funds is known as capital structure. Now, when you started your company, you had a capital structure, but you might have second thoughts. You might want to change the percentage of debt in your capital or change the percentage of equity in your capital. That is known as capital restructuring. So every time a company wishes to wishes to restructure their capital, they can avail financial services. So, to what extent should the debt and equity be changed? That is studied. Then, in case the unit has become sick, the company has become sick, they are unable to pay off their bills, they are unable to run their business, and they have become a sick unit, then how to restructure their capital in order to revive the company? That is another advice provided under financial services. Now, various areas of diversification are pointed out, and various strategies to restructure their capital base is also suggested under capital restructuring services. Next one is custodian service. Under custodian service, the customer's securities are handed over to the custodian for safekeeping. So the main intention is to prevent the certificates from being stolen or lost. Now, these securities can be held either in the electronic form or as paper certificates, which is known as a physical form. Now, apart from holding these securities, apart from safekeeping, various other services are also provided, such as account administration, collection of dividend and interest payments, foreign exchange management, and other services provided. Now, you might get a confusion as to what is the difference between a depository and a custodian service. See, depositories may manage your portfolios. Portfolio means a combination of securities. So they will help manage the portfolios and make decisions on behalf of the client. But custodians, they are simply holding the securities. They will only execute the wish of their client. They do not make investment decisions on behalf of their client. This is the main difference between custodian service and depositories. The depositories also play a role of a regulatory, right? They ensure that the transactions are transparent, they are free from fraud, they are genuine. But a custodian does not play the role of a regulator. Now, both the term depository and custodian are used interchangeably. The next one is safe custody. Okay, custodian service and safe custody are different. Safe custody means you're handing over important documents and valuables to a bank or financial institutions for safe custody. Like you are already familiar with locker service, right? You might open a locker, you might have a deposit, a box with the bank in which you keep your valuables. So usually the important things that you keep as safe custody is property deeds, your will, other valuables, and important documents of companies are all given for safe custody. The last one is stock broking. It is a service which gives retail and institutional investors opportunity to buy and sell equities. Stock broking is carried out by a stockbroker. In return for a commission, they will make trade of securities. That is, a stockbroking firm will charge commission on the trade it makes on a client's behalf, or a fee for retaining its services. That is, every time a stockbroker enters into a transaction on behalf of the client, they will charge a commission. Now, after a period of time, they will ask you to retain their service. In order to retain their service also, you will have to pay them a fee. There are different services are provided by the stockbrokers. First one is execution only stockbroker. That is, this person will only carry out your wish. That is, if you wish to sell, then sell. If you wish to buy, then buy. They will not be giving you any sort of an advice. Such stockbrokers are known as execution-only stockbrokers. Now there are advisory stockbrokers. They will give you a pointer on which are the well-performing securities, when to purchase, when to buy. But the ultimate decision is with the client. They can choose to follow the advices or not. But the stockbroker will provide advices. Third one is discretionary stockbrokers. The discretionary stockbrokers will trade the securities on behalf of the client. They will make the buy and sell decisions for the client. These are the discretionary stockbrokers. So with that, we come to an end of the third module. Thank you.